Before we dive into one of the most sophisticated military operations of this conflict, if you value deep analysis of modern warfare and strategic operations, hit that subscribe button for IntelX. We bring you the stories behind the headlines, the strategy behind the strikes. Now, let's begin. The clock struck 23 minutes past midnight on October 6, 2025. In that moment, two blazing spheres of destruction carved trajectories through the darkness above Scythe Airport, positioned along the western shoreline of occupied Crimea near Novorossiysk. This wasn't merely another skirmish in an ongoing conflict. What unfolded that night represented the opening movement of an intricately choreographed symphony of destruction, designed to sever the arteries feeding Russia's southern military machine. Inside the nerve center of the Russian Black Sea Fleet Command at Sevastopol, the tranquility of the night watch shattered as warning sirens pierced the air. Radar operators watched in growing alarm as their screens illuminated with hostile contacts, dozens of them, converging on the peninsula from western and northern vectors. Every blip materializing on those displays carried the promise of devastation. 63 unmanned aircraft and 3 cruise missiles were airborne, each launched from carefully selected positions across Ukrainian-controlled territory, each with its own lethal purpose. The Russian lieutenant general commanding Crimea's integrated air defense system faced a moment of truth. His decision came without hesitation: engage all targets. His words set in motion exactly what Ukrainian operational planners had meticulously predicted. The Russian response was textbook, immediate, and overwhelming. S-400 batteries roared to life, Pantsir S-1 systems spun their turrets skyward, Tor M1 launchers released their deadly cargo, the night sky transformed into a lattice of cons. Trails as interceptor missiles streaked upward, painting arcs of fire against the darkness. Yet with every missile launched, with every successful interception celebrated by Russian air defense crews, the trap's steel teeth drew closer. The Ukrainian plan was working with surgical precision. The foundation of this initial assault wave consisted of 48 specialized platforms, low-cost, high-velocity decoys designed not to destroy, but to deceive. These unmanned vehicles represented economic warfare as much as kinetic combat. Mass-produced from composite materials engineered to absorb rather than reflect radar energy, they included modified commercial quadcopters and repurposed UJ-22 airborne platforms converted for suicide missions. Their construction was deliberately simple, their production deliberately cheap. Their mission, however, was anything but simple. These aerial phantoms served 3 critical functions: saturate the defensive umbrella, exhaust precious interceptor stockpiles, and most crucially, force the enemy to expose his hand. As Russian air defense installations surrounding Saki and Kachcha airfields, Sevastopol, Simferopol, and Yevpatoria systematically eliminated these decoys one by one. Each successful kill paradoxically represented a strategic defeat. Every radar lock, every missile launch, every engagement transmitted invaluable intelligence to Ukrainian signals intelligence teams monitoring the electromagnetic spectrum. Precise coordinates, radar frequencies, engagement protocols, response times. Russia's defensive network was painting a self-portrait in real time, revealing its own anatomy to those who knew how to watch. Russian commanders, confident they had repelled a major assault, began drafting victory reports. They had no comprehension they'd been playing into Ukrainian hands from the first moment. This was the chess grandmaster's gambit, deliberately exposing pieces to map the opponent's defensive formation. While Russian attention fixated on these airborne distractions, the true predators approached through corridors of shadow, both electronic and physical, that the chaos itself had created. The trap had been set, the bait had been swallowed, the pathways were now clear for the killing blow. Behind this curtain of controlled chaos, from a clandestine launch facility near Odessa, the night's true instruments of destruction began their 300-kilometer journey. 2 Peklo cruise missiles, heavy and lethal, accompanied by 4 UJ-26 Bober drones carrying 50-kilogram warheads. Simultaneously, from positions closer to the Kherson front line, 4 lighter AQ-400 Scythe platforms took to the air. The brilliance of the operational design lay in its temporal precision. These systems, each with vastly different velocities and operational ranges, had been launched at staggered intervals calculated to ensure simultaneous arrival over target. This required mathematical precision across hundreds of kilometers of contested airspace. The Bober platforms, cruising at roughly 200 kilometers per hour, faced nearly 2 hours of flight time. The Peklo missiles, capable of 700 kilometers per hour, would, reach their destinations in 35 to 40 minutes. Therefore, the slower bombers launched first, their timing synchronized with microsecond accuracy to converge with the faster Peklo and Scythe systems at the critical moment. This represented four-dimensional warfare: distance, altitude, velocity, and time woven together into a tapestry designed to paralyze enemy decision-making. At 1:45 in the morning, this primary strike force approached Crimea's western coastline. To evade detection, they flew at altitudes between 30 and 50 meters above the Black Sea's surface, skimming between wave crests, threading the needle between water and sky. This altitude represented more than tactical caution. It exploited a fundamental limitation of physics. At such low elevation, these aircraft flew below the radar horizon of Russia's primary early warning systems, including the formidable 91 N6E Big Bird radar arrays integrated into the S-400 network. Due to the Earth's curvature, these sophisticated sensors simply could not detect them. The drones were invisible, ghosts riding the boundary between sea and air. As they penetrated Crimean airspace, a Krasuka-4 electronic warfare system activated, flooding the region with broadband GPS jamming. These Russian countermeasure platforms could create jamming bubbles spanning hundreds of square kilometers, completely blinding global navigation satellite systems. For conventional UAVs or cruise missiles, this represented a death sentence. Navigation systems corrupted, guidance systems blind, targets unreachable. But these platforms had been engineered for precisely this moment. Their flight computers detected the jamming instantly, rejected the corrupted satellite signals, and seamlessly transitioned to their primary guidance mode: inertial navigation systems. This represented the operation's most critical juncture. Russia's most powerful electronic warfare trump card had been rendered meaningless with a single software handoff. Utilizing precision ring laser gyroscopes and advanced accelerometers, these systems continued tracking their flight paths with millimeter-level accuracy, maintaining course without any external reference. They were flying blind through electromagnetic darkness, yet they knew exactly where they were going. As the digital smokescreen closed around them, the operation's true strike force prepared to reveal itself. This was never intended as indiscriminate bombardment. This was surgical warfare, meticulously targeted operations designed to dismantle the logistical ecosystem sustaining Russian military operations in Crimea: fuel, transportation, ammunition. Before the primary target could be engaged, supporting infrastructure had to be neutralized. The operation's first precision strike targeted Ivazovsky train station, a critical rail junction serving as the logistical spine connecting the Feodosia oil terminal to the front lines. This facility represented more than just a railroad stop. It was the arterial connection where refined petroleum products were loaded onto railway tankers and dispatched to support combat operations. 3 AQ-400 Scythe UAVs, modified with lighter but more penetrating 30-kilogram warheads, were assigned this objective. While defensive attention remained, fixated on decoy targets elsewhere, these three platforms infiltrated at terrain-hugging altitude. The first drone impacted the station's administrative complex and signal control center, severing command and control capabilities. The remaining two targeted critical infrastructure, railway switches and track sections, inflicting physical damage that would require days or weeks to repair. Though the attack generated no spectacular fireballs, it achieved its strategic objective completely. The rail link between Feodosia Terminal and the southern front was severed. Simultaneously, another lethal package approached a separate target deep within Crimean territory: the primary ammunition storage complex serving the 18th Combined Arms Army, currently engaged in operations along the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia fronts. The strike force assigned to this objective consisted of 4 specially configured UJ-26 Bober drones and 1 Peklo cruise missile. Rather than standard warheads, these Bobers carried 50 kilograms of enhanced explosives, multiplying their destructive potential at the cost of slightly reduced operational range. With defensive attention still fractured across the peninsula, the strike force penetrated at low altitude. The first Bober breached the perimeter defenses and plunged into a primary storage structure. Seconds later, successive Bober impacts followed. Finally, the Peklo missile, carrying a devastating 120-kilogram warhead, executed its terminal approach. Its imaging guidance system activated in the final moments, comparing real-time visuals against preloaded satellite imagery to identify the highest concentration of ammunition storage and directing its strike with surgical precision. The result transcended catastrophic. Hundreds of tons of artillery shells, Grad rockets, and S-300 surface-to-air missiles detonated in a cascading chain reaction. A mushroom cloud of fire erupted skyward, visible for dozens of kilometers. The seismic shockwave registered on monitoring equipment across the region. In a single devastating moment, the 18th Army's combat power wasn't merely degraded, it was vaporized. While these supporting strikes unfolded across the peninsula, the operation's spearhead made its final approach toward the true objective, the Feodosia maritime oil terminal, the lifeblood of Russia's southern military operations. This assault package consisted of 10 platforms, 4 AQ-400 Scythe drones with 30-kilogram warheads, 4 UJ-26 Bober drones carrying 50-kilogram warheads, and 2 heavy Peklo cruise missiles, each loaded with warheads exceeding 120 kilograms. Due to the heightened alert status across Crimea, terminal defense systems surrounding Feodosia activated. A Panzer battery achieved radar lock on an approaching Bober drone and launched a 57 E-6 interceptor missile, capable of velocities exceeding 1,300 meters per second. For the Russian operator, this appeared to be a successful engagement. He maintained lock. He tracked the intercept trajectory. He was in control. Then the nightmare scenario materialized. His tactical display suddenly populated with additional contacts, 5, 6, 7 new targets appearing almost simultaneously from multiple vectors, west, southwest, northeast. The system faced a calm OSINT. Putational crisis, too many targets, insufficient time, inadequate missiles. The carefully constructed defensive posture began to fracture. Meanwhile, the targeted Bober's passive radar warning receiver detected the Panzer's targeting lock and activated its miniature electronic warfare pod. The clean, solid lock on the Russian operator's display suddenly degraded into flickering uncertainty. In this electronic duel's confusion, 1 Scythe and 2 Bobers were successfully intercepted, but 7 strike platforms remained locked on their targets, committed to their final approach. The attack sequence unfolded with choreographed precision. First, an AQ-400 Scythe struck the initial fuel storage tank, its warhead designed to penetrate and weaken the heavy steel construction. Immediately, within 1 second, a second Scythe and the first Peklo missile with its massive 120-kilogram warhead impacted the identical point. The structural integrity reached saturation. The massive tank transformed into a fireball that illuminated the night like a miniature sun. Simultaneously, another AQ-400 Scythe and the second Peklo missile executed an identical sequential strike pattern against a second storage tank. Another thunderous detonation, another column of fire reaching skyward. Before we continue with the final moments of this operation, I want to mention that there's an ongoing donation campaign for Ukraine through United24 linked in our description. If you believe in supporting those fighting for their freedom and sovereignty, your contribution matters. Now back to the inferno at Feodosia. 2 UJ-26 Bober missiles, slower but carrying heavier 50-kilogram warheads along with the final AQ-400 Scythe, exploited the chaos created by the first 2 massive explosions. They converged on the third storage tank. While the combined explosive force targeting this tank was theoretically insufficient for guaranteed destruction, the chain reaction and thermal radiation from the first 2 tanks ignited the third. Within 10 seconds, the heart of Feodosia terminal had absorbed over 500 kilograms of precision-targeted high explosives. The result was inevitable, apocalyptic. By 2:30 in the morning, flames towered so high they were visible from dozens of kilometers away. NASA firm satellite thermal imaging confirmed multiple large-scale fires at the terminal's precise coordinates. The inferno's intensity necessitated the emergency evacuation of approximately 250 to 300 civilians from adjacent residential zones. Initial reports predictably spoke of accidents, industrial mishaps, fuel leaks, static electricity discharge, human error. This represents any system's first defensive layer, defaulting to the predictable, the manageable, the controllable. But 3 convergent streams of confirmation demolished this comfortable narrative. First came leaked reports from channels controlled by Russia's Ministry of Defense confirming the strike in their panic. Second were emergency bulletins that international news agencies transmitted under headlines like "Major Fire in Feodosia." Third, and most definitive, was the cold objective data captured by thermal imaging satellites in orbit. Indisputable evidence of the flame's magnitude and the massive smoke column rising from the site. A facility worth millions of dollars, protected by Russia's most sophisticated and layered air defense architecture, considered among the nation's most secure strategic assets, was engulfed in flames within minutes. This was no malfunction. This was warfare. On the night of October 6th, Russia's Ministry of Defense issued a statement claiming that more than 40 UAVs had been destroyed over Crimea. This figure might have been technically accurate, but it represented an admission of failure, not success. Because in asymmetric warfare, the defender's success metric is 100%, stopping all threats. The attacker's success metric is 1%, just one platform reaching its target. That night, Russia's million-dollar interceptor missiles may have eliminated dozens of cheap Ukrainian drones. But what mattered wasn't what was hit. What mattered was what wasn't hit. The operation's results extended far beyond burning fuel tanks in Crimea, generating systemic shockwaves throughout Russia's entire war machine. The Feodosia maritime oil terminal wasn't merely a storage facility inherited from Soviet-era infrastructure. This installation represented one of the Black Sea's most strategically vital fuel and ammunition transfer centers, the beating heart sustaining Russian military operations across the southern front. With its enormous capacity of 250,000 tons, this facility served as the primary center supplying fuel to Russian forces in Kherson and Zaporizhia via rail, maritime, and road networks. It stored not just crude oil, but specialized products that animated every component of the war machine. Diesel fuel powering the advance of T-90M and T-72B3 tank formations. TS-1 jet fuel keeping K-52 Alligator attack helicopters and Su-25 Frogfoot close air support aircraft dominating the skies above the battlefield. And critically, the heavy marine fuel determining the operational range of Kaliber cruise missiles launched from Admiral Grigorovich-class frigates of the Black Sea Fleet, projecting Russia's naval power across the region. A single day's interruption at this terminal could degrade a tank brigade's operational tempo at the front, limit an air regiment's sortie generation rate, and disrupt fleet patrol schedules. But Feodosia's importance transcended military logistics. This facility exemplified modern dual-use infrastructure strategy. The same pipelines and storage tanks supplied electricity to civilian settlements in Crimea and fuel to armored units at the front. A strike here wouldn't only slow the military wheel, but would disrupt civilian life's rhythm, creating regional instability. Therefore, destroying this hub meant not only clogging the Army's circulatory system, but simultaneously paralyzing the enemy's military and civilian nervous systems. This attack transformed the pre-existing fuel crisis in Crimea into complete collapse. Even before the strike, approximately 50% of gas stations across the peninsula had ceased selling gasoline. With Feodosia out of commission, fuel rationing began for both the civilian population and the occupying military forces. Tanks, armored vehicles, and logistics trucks sat idle at their bases, unable to refuel. The disaster's effects weren't confined to military logistics. For Crimea's residents, this attack represented the moment when war transformed from an abstract concept into concrete reality directly affecting daily life. Endless queues at gas stations, skyrocketing food prices, constant air raid sirens. An atmosphere of panic and insecurity settled over the occupied peninsula. Russia's propaganda narrative, which had portrayed Crimea as an impregnable fortress, burned to ashes alongside the oil tanks. Simultaneously, the closure of airports across 8 different Russian regions and power outages in cities like Belgorod transmitted a clear message to the Russian population. The war was no longer confined to Ukrainian territory. The conflict had come home. Russia was acutely aware of this strategic asset's absolute importance and had mobilized its best technology to protect it. That's why Crimea hosted one of the world's most dense and sophisticated integrated air defense systems. This wasn't a single system, but a layered defensive philosophy with components communicating and covering each other's vulnerabilities. It represented the modern 21st century manifestation of Soviet doctrine developed during the Cold War to counter NATO cruise missiles and stealth aircraft. At this philosophy's apex stood the S-400 Triumph system, the network's brain and eyes. It was supported by lower and mid-tier air defense systems, creating overlapping engagement zones. In theory, this system was impenetrable. The doctrine was flawless. The S-400 would detect and transmit data. The Panzer and Tor would destroy. Each layer would cover gaps in the previous one. However, this operation's backbone wasn't a million-dollar stealth aircraft or hypersonic missile. On the contrary, the weapon employed represented a physical manifestation of modern asymmetric warfare philosophy. Long-range, one-way attack, unmanned aerial vehicles developed by Ukraine using its own resources. This weapon was the 21st century's equivalent of David's sling, relying not on brute force but on intelligence, cost-effectiveness, and the ability to subvert enemy expectations. These platforms' design philosophy can be summarized in one word: expendability. While a single S-400 interceptor missile costs millions of dollars, one of these UAVs' production cost measured in tens of thousands. This economic asymmetry created an equation where the aggressor, willing to sacrifice dozens of UAVs, forced the defender to expend missiles worth fortunes. This was a war of attrition, but what was being worn down wasn't steel. It was the enemy's economy and ammunition stockpiles. Ultimately, this operation marks a significant evolution in Ukrainian military strategy. It demonstrates mature capability in planning and executing complex operations, integrating intelligence, deception, and multi-platform precision strikes. This single operation will necessitate fundamental reassessment of air defense doctrine globally, not just in Russia. This attack will serve as a definitive case study on the power of massed, unmanned systems employed with strategic sophistication. It proves that in modern conflict, the advantage it doesn't always belong to whoever possesses the most expensive technology. Sometimes victory belongs to whoever understands how to make their adversary's strength irrelevant. Thank you for watching IntelX. The targets mentioned in this operational analysis: Scythe Air Base, Kachcha Air Base, the 18th Army Ammunition Depot, cities across Crimea, the train station, and most importantly, the Feodosia refinery, are entirely real. Furthermore, these targets were indeed attacked by Ukrainian forces at the specified times. Our operational narrative was prepared based on analysis by our technical experts of official data from the Russian Ministry of Defense and Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, as well as verified imagery from social media sources. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe to IntelX for more deep dives into the operations shaping our world. Until next time, stay informed, stay critical, and stay engaged.